Alright, we're stepping into the next faction on Runeterra. This is State of Runeterra. This is Mizzo again. I'm going to tell you pretty much my thoughts and hopes for pre and post rotation. And we're with Ionia right now. So, things I see with Ionia is it has a solid champion pool. I wouldn't say it's the best or the worst. It's probably somewhere in the middle. But the one thing I will say about Ionia, other than it has strong 4-drop cards that everybody hates, um, and that's in spells, they at least create new cards for all these champions and try to play to all their types. And I appreciate that. So, and they haven't whiffed on a lot of it. Like, they are trying to make cards for their champions, which is good. And all the champions have been solid. I don't think, yeah. The only one that's been turbo busted is Lee Sin, and that's because it's Lee Sin, and they wanted to make sure we hated him in League and Runeterra exclusively, and make sure that anybody that does like him is probably a bad person. But we'll move on from that. So, all these champions have been super busted at some point in time. Ari was super busted before they nerfed her. Aurelia was super busted because of Avzir, and it was about as bad as Fizz TF in how abysmal it was, because I don't think there was many counters to the deck if it drew nuts and you didn't draw much to do about it, or didn't have anything in your hand to do much about. I will say they print a lot of stuff for people. Yasuo's had about 6 or 7 extra cards printed for him to make him viable, and to be honest, it already had it in the other factions. They just kept printing it in this faction to try to make sure he was playable all time. And I'm alright with it, because he's not abysmal, but you're not happy if he levels. They printed for Shin some. They printed some for him as well. I mean, they pretty much are trying to keep all the champions in this relevant, and all of them have been good or great at some point. When probably Karma's the most memey, and she's probably the strongest spellcaster champion in the game, that's a pretty good sign in general. So, other things that people hate this faction. This is the blue magic of this game, because it has a counter spell, but it's only for spells. You can't really counter a creature. That's the one good part about this game, is you can't counter some ETBs and some play abilities that are spell. Well, you can counter the spells, but you can't counter like ETBs and character effects well. You can do them after the fact if they're buffs or something, but that's all Targon, and or stun, and that's about it. So the reason this faction is hated so much is for its 4-cost spells. If you just put 4-cost spells Ionia, you're going to see everything that people hate. This, and this. And sometimes this. So, pretty much, in general, like, this is what's probably made Ionia available to be solid for a long time, is they have some of the most solid spell game in the world. Like, the small counter, putting creatures back in hand, putting creatures, making more creatures, putting a creature, making more, bringing a creature back with an ETB, or just saving your creature from stuff. They are the trixiest, stopping you. You can't do that. We don't like that. You should stop that sort of faction there is. Now, I will say that nobody likes to lose to Ionia. Yeah. Nobody likes to lose to this faction. Nobody's like thrilled. But it is not as ridiculous as it was in the beginning because everything mattered and a counter was more detrimental to you in the first year of the game probably than now, because now everybody's got value. You just move on to the next thing, hope it hits. And I would say counters are much more, the counter spell game is not as bad because there's not that many and they only hit spells. So you're kind of like, you're kind of not like, you're just trying to get through it. You're trying to play this faction for Rise or other people just to get to the goal. I would say that it has a lot of fun tricks. I've probably seen about 90% of every spell in this faction in the game and lost to it or won with it. So other than like no one's played that yet and no one's probably going to play that for the mana cost when you can just probably play them for free with RE for like 5 mana. So like in general, I think it would be fun to see them, how they're going to change their control and what they're going to do in the future. I think people just dislike and are triggered by you can't do that. It's kind of like when the Megamorph came out. They just wanted the button to say, okay, you suck, because it was burst speed, and now it's not burst speed anymore. So, I believe. So, like, in general, I just think people are like, I hate it because it plays like blue magic, and blue magic, when blue magic's blue magicking, is pretty unfun, and most people are most average players probably mental will be affected at some point, especially if you lose to it quite handily. But in general, I think it's in an okay state. It's not like dominating anything right now. I don't think it's abysmal, and and Lee Sin's not the best anymore, so that's kind of good too. You could say that's kind of a bad thing for them because they don't have a winning deck, but they do. Kind of. We'll figure it out. They're kind of for the YouTube memes, or like, I want to do this 14 times with karma or something like that. Because there's power in this, but it's quite different. And, some of the things you're real happy to copy don't really matter because that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That might matter. But in general, like, a lot of these things you do, copying twice is like whatever to it. So, these are my thoughts on Ionia. It's pretty simple. They're pretty simple. They're not what I would say the most complicated things to play. There will be some times that, you're going to have to manage your decks better. But in general, it's always been the value faction figuring out how to beat you with like 8 extra cards and seeing what happens. And now that's more Piltover's thing than them. And we'll just have to see in the future how they change it. They are elusive too. I think people also hate losing to elusives, and I don't know why. It's a playable thing, and all the elusives are squishy. And you're not going to beat everything in this game. That's impossible, because there's, like, I think 42 decks that at least have a solid win rate right now, over 50. So there's a lot of just hidden decks that nobody plays for some reason. So I would just say if you hate blue magic, you're always going to hate Ionia, but I don't even think it's the worst faction in the game. I think there are two better than it right now. I just think people don't like being told no anymore, and they're just getting a little triggered. See you next time.